The Crimson Talon hung motionless in the void between star systems, her sleek hull gleaming under the distant light of a binary star. Captain Zexhai flexed his forearms in satisfaction as he reviewed the latest payment confirmation on his neural display. 20 million galactic credits for eliminating a pirate stronghold in the Vega sector. Not bad for 3 days' work. The bridge of the mercenary vessel buzzed with quiet efficiency. His crew, handpicked from across the galaxy's most dangerous species, went about their tasks with practiced precision. Kethvar, his Nexian weapons specialist, calibrated the plasma cannons with surgical accuracy. The insectoid's compound eyes reflected the weapon diagnostics as streams of data flowed across multiple screens. Velterra, the ship's pilot and navigator, used her telepathic abilities to interface directly with the navigation computer, her pale blue skin shimmering as neural pathways lit up beneath the surface. Zexhai himself was a Carathian, a species known throughout the galaxy for their tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous armor plating naturally grown into his skin, he commanded respect through both physical presence and strategic genius. His mercenary company, the Crimson Talon, had built a reputation over 15 years as the most effective and expensive military contractors in known space. They had never failed a mission. Ever. The communication array chimed with an incoming transmission. Velterra's head tilted slightly as she processed the signal. "Captain, we have a priority transmission from the Galactic Mercenary Guild. High encryption, marked urgent." "Put it through to my ready room," Zexhai commanded, his gravelly voice carrying easily across the bridge. "Kethvar, you have the bridge." The weapons specialist's mandibles clicked in acknowledgement as Zexhai made his way to the private chamber behind the bridge. The ready room was spartanly furnished, containing only a desk, chair, and the advanced communication equipment necessary for conducting business across interstellar distances. He activated the holoprojector and was immediately greeted by the familiar sight of Guild Administrator Thexpol. The Galatian's tentacled face writhed with what Zexhai recognized as excitement. Thexpol's species was known for their business acumen and their ability to broker deals between the galaxy's various factions. If he was contacting the Crimson Talon directly rather than posting the job on the general mercenary boards, it meant serious money was involved. "Captain Zexhai," Thexpol's synthesized voice bubbled through the translator. "I trust your recent operation in the Vega sector concluded successfully?" "The pirate base no longer exists," Zexhai replied simply. "Neither do the pirates." "What do you have for us, Administrator?" "A unique opportunity. One of our most prestigious clients requires a military solution to a rather delicate problem. The compensation is substantial, 100 million galactic credits." Zexhai's eyes narrowed. In 15 years of mercenary work, he had never seen a contract worth that much. The most expensive job they had ever taken was worth 35 million, and that had involved overthrowing a planetary government. What's the target? A single planet in an isolated system. Third planet from a G-class star, roughly 12,000 light-years from the galactic core. The inhabitants have proven resistant to our client's expansion efforts. Previous attempts at negotiation have failed, and our client requires a more direct approach. Military strength of the defenders? Thexpol's tentacles writhed in what might have been amusement. "That's the interesting part, Captain. According to our intelligence, they possess no spacefaring capability to speak of. No orbital defenses, no fleet, no advanced weapons technology. Their most sophisticated military equipment appears to be chemical propellant projectile weapons and primitive guided missiles." Zexhai felt a flicker of suspicion. If they're so primitive, why hasn't your client simply conquered them directly? And why is the payment so high? "Our client attempted a direct assault 18 months ago. They sent a battalion of their finest troops, Sardinian shock troopers, equipped with the latest military technology. The entire force was eliminated within 6 hours of planetary landing." The Carathian captain leaned back in his chair, processing this information. Sardinian shock troopers were among the galaxy's most feared military units. Trained from birth for warfare, equipped with powered armor and energy weapons, they were considered nearly unstoppable in ground combat. The idea that primitives with projectile weapons could eliminate an entire battalion was absurd. What happened to them? Unknown. The last transmission from the surface indicated heavy resistance and unexpected casualties. Then, silence. Subsequent reconnaissance missions have either failed to return or brought back reports that our client considers unreliable. What kind of reports? Thexpol's translator paused for a moment before continuing. Claims of impossible physical capabilities among the defenders. Stories of primitives surviving direct hits from energy weapons, moving with superhuman speed and agility, demonstrating strength levels that exceed even the most enhanced galactic species. Our client believes these reports are the result of combat stress and primitive fear tactics. Zexhai stood and began pacing, his tactical mind analyzing the information. Send me everything you have on this planet and its inhabitants. Geological surveys, biological data, atmospheric composition, population centers. Everything. Already transmitted to your ship's computer. Captain, I should mention that 6 other mercenary companies have already declined this contract. Some after reviewing the preliminary data, others after. Other considerations arose, such as, the planet is classified as a death world, Captain. Class 12 on the habitability scale. Zexhai stopped pacing. The habitability scale ran from 1 to 15, with 1 being a paradise world, and 15 being completely uninhabitable. Most civilized species evolved on worlds rated between 3 and 7. A Class 12 death world was barely capable of sustaining life at all. The atmospheric composition alone would be toxic to most galactic species, not to mention the extreme gravity, radiation levels, weather patterns, and indigenous life forms that earned such worlds their classification. What species could possibly evolve on a Class 12 world? The inhabitants call themselves humans, Captain. Bipedal, carbon-based, mammalian. Our preliminary biological scans indicate they're remarkably similar to dozens of other species throughout the galaxy, but with some unusual adaptations. They seem to have evolved as persistence hunters on a world where almost everything else evolved to kill them. Zexhai activated his personal data terminal and began reviewing the transmitted files. The planet, which the humans called Earth, was indeed a nightmare by galactic standards. Gravity was nearly twice galactic standard. The atmosphere contained a concentration of oxygen that would be toxic to most species. Weather patterns included violent storms that could level cities, temperature variations that ranged from freezing to furnace hot, and geological instability that caused regular catastrophic events. But it was the biological data that truly caught his attention. The humans had not evolved as the apex predator of their world. Instead, they had evolved as prey animals who became predators through sheer determination and intelligence. They were pursuit hunters, capable of tracking prey across vast distances through pure endurance. Their cardiovascular systems were adapted for continuous exertion that would kill most galactic species. Their muscle density and bone structure allowed them to survive impacts that would pulverize other beings. Most remarkably, they seemed to possess an unusual psychological trait that their own scientists called adrenaline response. In situations of extreme stress or danger, their bodies would flood with stimulating chemicals that increased their strength, speed, and pain tolerance while simultaneously shutting down their sense of self-preservation. They literally became more dangerous the closer they came to death. Zexhai had seen many warrior species in his time. The Nexians were bred for war, the Sardinians were enhanced for combat, the Carathians like himself were naturally armored and tactically gifted. But none of them had evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill them every single day for millions of years. He continued reading, his respect for these humans growing with each data file. They had not only survived on their death world, they had thrived. Their population was in the billions. They had developed technology, art, culture, and complex societies while constantly battling their own environment. They fought wars against each other with a ferocity that would impress even the most bloodthirsty galactic species, yet somehow maintained cooperation and empathy that allowed them to build civilizations. And they had never been conquered. Ever. Not by their environment, not by the countless predators that shared their world, not by their own internal conflicts, and apparently not by alien invaders either. Zexhai closed the data files and returned his attention to Thexpol, who had been waiting patiently during his review. The Galatians' tentacles were now moving in slow, hypnotic patterns that indicated nervousness. 100 million credits, the administrator repeated, plus salvage rights to any human technology or resources your forces acquire. Our client is quite motivated to see this matter resolved. Zexhai looked out through the viewport at the stars. In 15 years, the Crimson Talon had never failed a mission. They had toppled governments, eliminated pirate fleets, and solved problems that entire planetary armies couldn't handle. Their reputation was built on the certainty that if you hired them, the job would get done. But, as he stared into the void, Zexhai found himself thinking about the Sardinian shock troopers who had gone to Earth 18 months ago. Elite warriors with the best equipment the galaxy could provide, trained for warfare from birth, augmented with the finest military technology available. They had arrived on Earth expecting to face primitives with crude weapons. None of them had ever left. Administrator, Zexhai said finally, his voice carefully neutral. I need time to discuss this with my crew. We'll transmit our decision within 24 hours. Of course, Captain. But I should mention that our client is growing impatient. If the Crimson Talon cannot take this contract, they may be forced to pursue other solutions. Understood. We'll be in touch. The transmission ended, leaving Zexhai alone with his thoughts. He activated the ship's intercom system. All senior staff to the briefing room in 10 minutes. Priority Alpha. As he made his way to the briefing room, Zexhai found himself wondering something he had never wondered before in his entire career. Was there a job that even the galaxy's best mercenaries shouldn't take? The briefing room filled quickly. Besides Velterra and Kethvar, the senior staff included Dr. Nixera, their Zentorian medic and biologist, and Gorthmag, their Thurian assault specialist. Each of them had followed Zexhai for years, trusting his judgment and tactical brilliance to keep them alive and profitable. He activated the holo display and began presenting the data on Earth and its human inhabitants. As the presentation continued, he watched the expressions on his crew's faces change from interest to concern to something approaching disbelief. Dr. Nixera was the first to speak when he finished. Her crystalline voice carried a note of scientific fascination mixed with professional concern. Captain, these biological readings, if they're accurate, these humans are living weapons. Their cardiovascular efficiency alone would make them capable of sustained combat operations that would exhaust any of our known warrior species. Kethvar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. The tactical data doesn't make sense. How do primitives with chemical weapons eliminate Sardinian shock troopers? Their armor should have made them immune to anything these humans could field. Unless, Gorthmag rumbled in his deep bass voice, the Sardinians underestimated their opponents. Pride has killed more warriors than any weapon. The massive Thurian had fought alongside and against Sardinians before. He knew their capabilities and their weaknesses. Velterra had been silent during the presentation, her telepathic abilities allowing her to absorb the information more quickly than the others. When she finally spoke, her mental voice carried undertones of unease that bypassed their translators entirely. Captain, there's something else. I've been monitoring galactic communication networks during your presentation. There are rumors. What kind of rumors? Other species have encountered humans. Not on Earth, but other places. Ships that went missing in remote sectors, only to be found later with their crews, changed. Reports of humans appearing in slave markets, only to disappear again along with anyone who tried to capture them. There's a pattern, but it's being suppressed at the highest levels of galactic government. Zexhai absorbed this information, adding it to his growing assessment of the situation. Dr. Nixera, in your professional opinion, what would be the minimum force necessary to successfully invade a Class 12 death world inhabited by a species adapted for survival warfare? The Zentorian's crystalline features shifted as she considered the question. Honestly, Captain, I would recommend orbital bombardment to sterilize the surface, followed by robotic occupation forces. Any organic troops sent to the surface would be fighting in an environment specifically designed to kill them, against opponents who have spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to survive in that environment. And if orbital bombardment isn't an option, then I would recommend finding a different planet to conquer. The room fell silent as the implications of her statement sank in. Zexhai looked around at his crew. beings who had followed him into battles against impossible odds, who had trusted his tactical genius to see them through situations that would have destroyed other mercenary companies. For the first time in 15 years, he found himself considering the possibility of refusing a contract. "The fee is 100 million credits," he said quietly. "Enough to retire comfortably on any paradise world in the galaxy. Enough to buy our own fleet, our own planet if we want it." "Credits don't spend well if you're dead," Gorthmag observed pragmatically. Kethvar's compound eyes focused on the tactical display showing Earth's defensive positions. "We've never failed a mission, Captain. Our reputation is built on completing every contract we accept. Our reputation is also built on being alive to accept new contracts," Velterra pointed out. "Dead mercenaries don't maintain reputations for very long." Zexhai stood and walked to the viewport that showed the vast expanse of space beyond their ship. Somewhere out there, 12,000 light-years away, was a small blue planet where a species called humans had turned their entire world into a fortress. A species that had fought their own environment for millions of years and won. A species that had somehow eliminated an entire battalion of the galaxy's finest soldiers using nothing but primitive weapons and, apparently, unlimited determination. "There's something else to consider," he said without turning from the viewport. "If we take this contract and fail, we're not just dead. We're dead, and our failure proves that humans can stand against the galaxy's best military forces. That makes them a threat to galactic stability. And if we refuse?" Dr. Nixera asked. "Then, someone else will take the contract. Someone less experienced, less careful, less likely to succeed. And when they fail, the humans will have proven themselves against multiple galactic military forces. That makes them an even bigger threat." Gorthmag shifted his massive bulk, a sound like grinding stone. "There's a third option, Captain, which is, we take the contract, but not to invade. We go to Earth to make contact, to learn what these humans are really capable of. If they're as dangerous as the data suggests, maybe it's better to have them as allies than enemies." The suggestion hung in the air like a live explosive. Making unauthorized contact with a pre-space civilization was a violation of galactic law punishable by lifetime imprisonment. But if humans were capable of defeating Sardinian shock troopers, they might not be a pre-space civilization much longer. "That would mean deceiving our client," Zexhai said slowly. "Our client wants a problem solved," Kethvar observed. "Maybe the best solution isn't the one they originally requested." Zexhai turned back to face his crew. These beings had trusted him with their lives for years, following him into battles across the galaxy because they believed in his judgment and tactical brilliance. Now they were looking to him for guidance in a situation that no mercenary manual had ever prepared them for. "We have 24 hours to decide," he said finally. "I want everyone to review the data independently and give me your individual assessments. But understand this, whatever we decide, we're all committed to it. If we take this contract, we go to Earth together. If we refuse it, we refuse it together. And if we try Gorthmag's approach, we become the galaxy's most wanted criminals together," Velterra finished. "Exactly," as his crew filed out of the briefing room, each carrying copies of the Earth data to review privately. Zexhai remained at the viewport. The stars looked the same as they always had, but somehow the galaxy felt different now. Larger, more dangerous, more uncertain. For 15 years, he had built his reputation on accepting any contract and completing it successfully. The Crimson Talon was known throughout civilized space as the mercenary company that could solve any problem, eliminate any threat, overcome any obstacle. But, as he stared into the void, Zexhai found himself wondering if some problems were meant to be left unsolved. Some threats were meant to be left alone. Some obstacles were warnings rather than challenges. Tomorrow, he would have to make a decision that could change the fate of his crew, his company, and potentially the entire galaxy. Tonight, he would review every piece of data they had on Earth and its human inhabitants, searching for some insight that would tell him whether the Crimson Talon should travel to a small blue planet on the edge of nowhere. A planet where something called humans had learned to turn survival itself into an art form. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles of the tiny beings who moved between them. But Somewhere among those stars, 12,000 light-years away, a world called Earth waited in the darkness. And on that world, 3 billion humans continued the billion-year war between life and death that had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that might be too dangerous for even the galaxy's best mercenaries to face. Captain HFY stood in his private quarters, reviewing the Earth data for the 7th time in 12 hours. Sleep had been elusive, his tactical mind churning through scenarios and possibilities like a computer processing combat algorithms. Each time he thought he had found a flaw in the human defenses, another piece of data would surface that made him reconsider. The humans had no space fleet, but they didn't need one if they could make planetary invasions so costly that no sane military commander would attempt it. They had no energy weapons, but their projectile technology was surprisingly sophisticated when examined closely. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to have developed their entire military doctrine around fighting opponents with superior technology and numbers. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. "Come in." Dr. Nixera entered, her crystalline features reflecting the data displays around the room. As the ship's biologist and medic, her analysis would be crucial to any decision they made about Earth. She carried a data pad filled with her independent assessment of human capabilities. "Captain, I've completed my biological analysis of the human species. I'm afraid my conclusions haven't changed from yesterday's briefing." She paused, her translucent fingers dancing across the data pad. "If anything, a more detailed examination has made me more concerned about potential combat operations against them." "Explain." "Their muscle fiber density is approximately 30% higher than galactic standard. Their bone structure is designed to withstand impact forces that would shatter the skeletons of most civilized species. But that's not the most concerning aspect." She activated a holographic display showing the human nervous system. "Their pain tolerance is extraordinary. They can continue fighting with injuries that would incapacitate or kill other species. I've found documented cases of humans continuing combat operations with multiple projectile wounds, broken bones, even partial limb amputations." HFY studied the display, his tactical mind automatically calculating the implications. An enemy that didn't retreat when wounded was far more dangerous than one that preserved itself for future battles. What causes this unusual pain tolerance? Their neurochemistry. When stressed or injured, humans produce a cocktail of natural stimulants and pain suppressors that effectively turns them into biological combat drugs. Adrenaline, endorphins, norepinephrine. Their own bodies chemically enhance their combat capabilities in response to danger. The door chimed again. This time Kethvar entered, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays. The Nexian weapons specialist had spent the night analyzing human military technology and tactics. "Captain, Dr. Nixera," he acknowledged them with a rapid clicking of mandibles. "I trust you've reached similar conclusions about our potential opponents." "That depends on your assessment of their military capabilities," HFY replied. Kethvar activated his own data pad, displaying human weapons systems. Their individual small arms are primitive by galactic standards, but remarkably effective within their limitations. Chemical propellant projectile weapons that fired dense metal slugs at supersonic velocities. Simple, reliable, devastating against unarmored targets. "The Sardinians were armored," HFY pointed out. "Yes, but look at these specifications." Kethvar highlighted several weapon systems. "The humans have developed armor-penetrating ammunition specifically designed to defeat advanced defensive systems. Depleted uranium cores, shaped charges, kinetic penetrators. They've spent considerable effort learning how to kill things that are harder to kill than they are." Dr. Nixera's features shifted in what might have been concern. "That suggests they regularly face opponents with natural armor or technological protection." "Exactly. And examine their tactical doctrines." Kethvar brought up military manuals that had been recovered from captured human communication networks. "They don't fight fair, Captain. They use terrain, weather, psychological warfare, and asymmetric tactics specifically designed to negate technological and physical advantages their enemies might possess." HFY absorbed this information, adding it to his growing picture of human military capabilities. "What about their larger weapons systems?" "Crude, but effective. Chemical explosives, guided missiles, projectile artillery. Nothing that should threaten a modern military force directly. But Captain, Kethvar paused, his mandibles clicking slowly. They've never fought a defensive war on their own planet, and lost. Ever. Not against their own species, not against their environment, not against anything. The three of them stood in contemplative silence for several minutes, each processing the implications of what they had learned. Finally, Dr. Nixera spoke. Captain, there's something else. I've been monitoring galactic medical databases, looking for any treatment records related to human contact. What I found concerns me. Go on. 3 months ago, a private medical facility in the Rigel system treated a Sardinian mercenary for severe psychological trauma. The patient claimed to be a survivor of the Earth operation. Zexhi's attention focused immediately. I thought there were no survivors from that operation. Officially, there weren't. But this individual was found drifting in an escape pod near the edge of the system, severely malnourished, and suffering from what their doctors classified as combat-induced psychosis. He kept repeating the same phrase over and over. They don't stop. No matter what you do to them, they don't stop. Kethvar's compound eyes refocused on Dr. Nixera. What happened to this survivor? He disappeared from the medical facility 2 days after being treated. No record of discharge, no security footage of his departure. He simply vanished. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air of the captain's quarters. If there had been a survivor from the Earth operation, someone wanted to ensure his story didn't spread. That suggested a level of concern at the highest levels of galactic government about what had really happened on Earth. Another chime announced the arrival of Gorthmag and Velterra. The massive Thurian had to duck slightly to enter the quarters, his naturally armored hide scarred from decades of combat. Velterra followed, her telepathic abilities allowing her to sense the tension in the room before anyone spoke. I can feel your unease from the bridge, Velterra said, her mental voice bypassing the translators entirely. I take it your individual analyses haven't improved the tactical picture? If anything, they've made it worse, Zexhi admitted. What did you two discover in your research? Gorthmag's voice rumbled like distant thunder. I studied human combat footage recovered from their global communication networks. Captain, these beings fight their own species with the intensity that would impress a Sardinian berserker. But, more importantly, they fight their own planet every single day. He activated a holographic display showing various scenes from Earth's surface. Humans battling forest fires with nothing but primitive equipment and determination. Humans rescuing each other from floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. Humans venturing into environments that would kill most galactic species just to explore or conduct research. They don't just live on a death world, Gorthmag continued. They've made it their ally. Every natural disaster that should decimate their population instead makes them stronger, more adaptable, more determined to survive. Velterra stepped forward, her pale features troubled. I used my telepathic abilities to reach out across interstellar distances, trying to sense any human mental activity. What I found was unsettling. Telepathic contact across 12,000 light-years. Dr. Nixera asked in surprise. That should be impossible, even for a Zentorian telepath. It should be. But human minds are loud. Their thoughts carry farther than they should, and they're more intense than any species I've encountered. But that's not the disturbing part. She paused, her mental voice taking on undertones of unease. Captain, they know we exist. The human governments are aware of galactic civilization, and they're preparing for contact. Not peaceful contact, military contact. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If humans knew about galactic civilization and were preparing for conflict, then they weren't the primitive, isolated species the contract had described. They were a potential threat that was actively preparing to defend itself against superior technology. How much do they know? Zexhi asked. Difficult to determine at this distance, but they've detected our faster-than-light communication networks. Their scientists are working to decode our languages and understand our technology. Most concerning of all, they're united in a way that most planets never achieve. Kethvar's mandibles clicked rapidly. United how? Their various governments and military forces are coordinating their efforts specifically to defend against extraterrestrial invasion. Captain, they've turned their entire planet into a fortress, and They've had 18 months since the Sardinian incident to improve their defenses. Zexhai walked to his viewport, staring out at the stars while his tactical mind processed this new information. A united planet was almost unheard of in galactic history. Most civilizations remained fractured by politics, religion, economics, or species differences even after achieving spaceflight. The idea that humans had unified their entire world for defense suggested a level of determination and cooperation that was both impressive and terrifying. There's something else, Velterra continued. I detected other human minds scattered throughout the galaxy. Not on Earth, elsewhere. Individuals who have somehow left their planet and are operating in galactic space. Impossible, Dr. Nixera stated flatly. Earth has no space flight capability beyond primitive orbital insertion. And yet they're out there. I can sense at least a dozen human minds in various locations throughout civilized space. Some appear to be in captivity. Others seem to be operating freely. But, Captain, Velterra's mental voice carried a note of warning. The free ones are hunting. Hunting what? Anyone connected to the Earth operation. I can sense their intentions. They're tracking down everyone involved in the attack on their world. Not for information, not for negotiation. For revenge. Gorthmag shifted his massive bulk, a sound like grinding stone. A species that sends covert operatives to hunt their enemies across galactic distances while simultaneously fortifying their home world for siege warfare. Captain, we're not being hired to invade a primitive planet. We're being hired to attack a military fortress inhabited by evolved weapons. Zexhai turned back to face his crew. 5 beings who had followed him through countless battles, who had trusted his tactical genius to see them through impossible situations. Now they were looking to him for guidance in a situation that challenged everything they thought they knew about military operations. Dr. Nixera, in your professional opinion, what would be the probable casualty rate for any invasion force sent to Earth? The Zentorian's crystalline features shifted as she considered the question. Based on what we've learned, 100%, Captain. Not just casualties, complete elimination of the invasion force. These humans have spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things that are bigger, stronger, and better armed than they are. An invasion of their home world would be fighting them on their terms, in their environment, defending their families. It would be suicide. Kethvar. The weapons specialist's mandibles clicked slowly. I agree with Dr. Nixera. Moreover, any invasion attempt would likely provoke a response that could threaten galactic stability. If humans are already operating covert forces throughout civilized space, a direct attack on Earth could trigger a war that spans multiple sectors. Gorthmag. The massive Thurian was quiet for a long moment before responding. Captain, I've fought beside and against every major warrior species in the galaxy. I've never encountered a species that evolved specifically to survive in an environment designed to kill them. The combat footage I reviewed shows humans fighting with a determination that goes beyond courage or training. It's existential. They fight as if their entire species depends on the outcome of every battle. Velterra. The telepath's mental voice carried undertones of certainty that bypassed all argument. Captain, these humans represent either the galaxy's greatest potential threat or its greatest potential ally. But they will never be conquered. Their world has been trying to kill them for millions of years and has only succeeded in making them stronger. We would be fools to think we could do what their own planet could not. Zexhai looked around at his crew, professionals who had built their careers on completing impossible missions, who had never backed down from a challenge no matter how dangerous. For the first time in 15 years, they were unanimously recommending against taking a contract. He activated his personal communication system and sent a priority message to Guild Administrator Thexpol. The Crimson Talon declines the Earth contract. We recommend that your client pursue diplomatic solutions rather than military ones. The response came back within minutes. Captain, our client is prepared to increase the compensation to 150 million credits. Surely the galaxy's most successful mercenary company can find a solution to this problem. Zexhai stared at the message for a long moment. 150 million credits. Enough to buy a small fleet, a paradise world, comfortable retirement for his entire crew. All they had to do was travel to a small blue planet and Eliminate a species of evolved survivors who had turned their entire world into a weapon. Send another message, he told his communication system. The Crimson Talon's refusal is final. We strongly advise your client to avoid any military action against Earth or its human inhabitants. This time, the response took longer. When it finally arrived, the tone was noticeably cooler. Very well, Captain. We will inform our client of your decision. However, I should mention that other mercenary companies are already expressing interest in this contract. Perhaps the Crimson Talon's reputation for accepting any challenge has been overstated? Zexhai deleted the message without responding. Let other mercenary companies make their own decisions about Earth. The Crimson Talon had built their reputation on successful completion of contracts, not on accepting suicide missions disguised as lucrative opportunities. Captain, Veltera said, her mental voice careful and neutral. I should mention that I'm still sensing human minds operating throughout galactic space. If our refusal becomes known to them, they'll know we're not a threat to their world, Zexhai finished. Which is better than them knowing we're dead because we were foolish enough to attack it. He looked around at his crew one final time. Gentlemen, lady, we have just done something unprecedented in the history of the Crimson Talon. We have refused a contract, and possibly saved our lives in the process, Dr. Nixera observed. The question now, Kethvar said, his compound eyes reflecting the tactical displays around the room, is what we do with the information we've gathered about Earth and its human inhabitants. It was a good question. The data they had collected painted a picture of a species that could potentially threaten galactic stability if provoked into military action. But it also suggested a species that might be valuable allies if approached diplomatically rather than militarily. We keep the information secure and classified, Zexhai decided. And we monitor galactic communication networks for any news about other mercenary companies accepting the Earth contract. And if someone else does accept it? Gorthmag rumbled. Zexhai turned back to the viewport, staring out at the stars where, somewhere in the darkness, a small blue planet waited with 3 billion humans who had learned to turn survival itself into an art form. Then, we'll have front row seats to watch the galaxy learn why some species should never be awakened, he said quietly. And we'll hope that whoever does accept that contract doesn't trigger a war that consumes us all. Outside the ship, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the decisions of tiny beings moving between them. But somewhere among those stars, 12,000 light-years away, 3 billion humans continued their preparations for a war they hoped would never come. While scattered throughout galactic space, other humans pursued their own missions with the patient determination of evolved predators. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone made the mistake of threatening a species that had turned its own extinction into motivation for survival. And the Crimson Talon, for the first time in 15 years, would be watching from a safe distance as other mercenaries discovered why some contracts should never be accepted. 3 weeks after declining the Earth contract, Captain Zexhai received an encrypted priority message that made his blood run cold. The message came from an untraceable source and contained only 5 words. The Iron Ravens took it. The Iron Ravens were the second most successful mercenary company in known space, led by Captain Vorthe K, a Nexian warrior whose tactical brilliance rivaled Zexhai's own. They commanded 3 ships, over 200 elite soldiers, and had a reputation for completing missions that other companies couldn't handle. If the Ravens had accepted the Earth contract, it meant the galaxy's second-best mercenaries were about to discover what had happened to the Sardinian shock troopers. Zexhai immediately called his senior staff to an emergency briefing. As they assembled in the conference room, Veltera's telepathic abilities were already picking up his anxiety. "Captain," she said before he could speak, "I can sense your distress from across the ship. What's happened?" He activated the holographic display and showed them the message. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "The Iron Ravens," Kethvar said, his mandibles clicking slowly. 3 ships, full company strength. If they take Earth seriously, they'll bring enough firepower to glass a continent. "They'll take it seriously," Gorthmag rumbled. Vorthe K didn't build his reputation by underestimating opponents. He'll study the Sardinian failure and plan accordingly. Dr. Nixera's crystalline features shifted in concern. which means he'll approach Earth expecting to face dangerous opponents rather than primitives. That could actually make the situation worse. Zexhai activated the Galactic Communication Monitoring System they use to track military movements throughout civilized space. Velterra, I need you to reach out with your telepathic abilities. Try to locate the Iron Ravens and determine their current status. The Zentorian closed her eyes, her pale features concentrating as her mind reached across interstellar distances. For several minutes, the only sound in the briefing room was the quiet hum of ship systems. Finally, her eyes opened, and her mental voice carried undertones of concern. I can sense them, Captain. 3 ships, approximately 8,000 light-years from here, and moving toward Earth. But there's something strange. Their mental patterns suggest they're not approaching this as a standard military operation. Explain. Captain Vorthake's thoughts are calculating. He's not planning an invasion. He's planning a test. I believe he intends to probe human defenses and capabilities before committing his full force. Zexhai's tactical mind immediately understood the implications. He's going to send advanced scouts to gather intelligence. Which means he'll learn what we learned, Kethvar observed. That humans are not the primitives they appear to be. Or, Dr. Nixera said quietly, he'll discover exactly how dangerous they really are. The next several days passed with agonizing slowness. Zexhai found himself constantly monitoring galactic communication networks, searching for any news about Iron Raven's operations or human activity. His crew went about their normal duties, but there was an underlying tension aboard the Crimson Talon as they waited for news from Earth. It came on the 5th day. The Galactic Emergency Communication Network suddenly erupted with activity. Emergency beacons, distress signals, and priority military transmissions flooded the channels. Zexhai rushed to the communication center, where his crew was already analyzing the incoming data. Captain, Velterra said, her mental voice tight with concern. Something has happened in the Sol system. The Iron Ravens sent a reconnaissance ship to Earth orbit 3 days ago. And the ship is gone. Not destroyed, gone. Vanished without a trace. Kethvar brought up the tactical display. According to the emergency beacon data, the reconnaissance ship, the Talon's Edge, was conducting orbital surveillance of Earth when it simply disappeared from all sensors. No distress signal, no weapon signatures, no debris field. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. Dr. Nixera was monitoring biological scanner readings. Captain, I'm detecting massive quantum signatures throughout the Sol system. Whatever the humans did to that ship, it involved technology that shouldn't exist on a pre-space civilization planet. Gorthmag's voice carried a note of professional respect. A species that can make a military starship disappear from orbit without leaving a trace is not a species anyone should underestimate. But the real shock came 6 hours later, when a message arrived through official galactic diplomatic channels. The message originated from Earth itself, transmitted on galactic standard frequencies with perfect translation protocols. To whom it may concern, the message began in flawless galactic standard. We are the United Earth Defense Force. Your reconnaissance vessel has been captured intact, along with its crew. They are unharmed and will be returned to you under the following conditions. First, all military operations against Earth will cease immediately. Second, any future contact with our world will be conducted through diplomatic channels rather than military ones. Third, we request immediate communication with representatives of galactic civilization to discuss Earth's integration into the galactic community as an equal partner, not a conquered territory. The message continued. We are aware that various galactic powers have attempted to invade our world. These attempts have failed because Earth is not an undefended primitive planet. We are a unified species prepared to defend our home against any threat. However, we prefer cooperation to conflict and are willing to negotiate with any galactic powers that approach us with peaceful intentions. The message ended with coordinates for establishing diplomatic contact and a warning. Any future military action against Earth will be considered an act of war against a unified planetary defense force. We strongly recommend that all interested parties reconsider their approach to human-galactic relations. Zexhai stared at the message for a long moment, his tactical mind processing the implications. The humans had not only captured an Iron Raven's reconnaissance ship without destroying it, they had done so using technology that wasn't supposed to exist. More importantly, they were now actively communicating with galactic civilization on their own terms. Captain, Velterra said, her telepathic abilities picking up something the others couldn't sense. There's something else. I'm detecting human minds throughout this sector now. Not just on Earth, they're everywhere. Impossible, Dr. Nixera stated. Earth has no space flight capability. Then, how do you explain this? Velterra activated the long-range sensor display. I'm reading human mental signatures on 17 different ships within a 50 light-year radius. They're not passengers or captives. They're crew members, officers, even ship commanders. Kethar's compound eyes focused on the sensor data. Captain, these readings suggest humans have been operating in galactic space far longer than anyone realized. If they've been infiltrating our societies while maintaining the pretense of being a primitive species, then they've been preparing for this contact for years, possibly decades, Zexhai finished. The question is, what are they really capable of? The answer came sooner than expected. Within 24 hours of the diplomatic message, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human-crewed ships were materializing in major trade routes, not attacking, but simply making their presence known. Human operatives were revealing themselves at galactic universities, research facilities, and government centers. Most shocking of all, human representatives were requesting formal meetings with the Galactic Council itself. But it was the news about the Iron Ravens that truly demonstrated human capabilities. Captain Vorthak himself transmitted a message to the Mercenary Guild, officially withdrawing from the Earth contract. The message was brief, but telling. The Iron Ravens have reached an understanding with Earth's defenders. We recommend that all mercenary companies avoid accepting contracts against human interests. These beings are not primitives, and their world is not defenseless. Any future operations against Earth would be inadvisable. The message was accompanied by sensor recordings from the captured reconnaissance ship. The recordings showed the Talon's edge being enveloped by some kind of energy field that simply transported it from Earth orbit to a location inside the planet's moon. The moon, it turned out, was not a natural satellite, but a massive artificial construct. A space station disguised to look like Luna, equipped with technology that could manipulate space-time itself. They hollowed out their moon and turned it into a fortress, Gorthmag observed with professional appreciation. A fortress equipped with technology that makes our best military hardware look like primitive tools. Dr. Nixera was studying the biological readings from the Iron Raven's crew. Captain, look at these medical scans. The humans who captured the Talon's edge weren't wearing environmental suits or breathing apparatus. They were operating in hard vacuum, as if it were their natural environment. Enhanced humans, Velterra said, her mental voice carrying undertones of amazement. They've been modifying themselves for space operations while maintaining populations of unmodified humans on their planet. They've been preparing for galactic contact for generations. Zexhai walked to the viewport, staring out at stars that suddenly seemed much less familiar. For 15 years, he had believed he understood the galaxy and humanity's place in it. Civilized species evolved on relatively safe worlds, developed technology, achieved spaceflight, and then either joined galactic civilization or were conquered by it. It was a pattern that had repeated thousands of times throughout galactic history. But humans had broken the pattern. They had evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill them, used that experience to develop survival instincts and combat capabilities that surpassed anything in the galaxy, secretly achieved spaceflight while pretending to be primitive, infiltrated galactic civilization to learn its strengths and weaknesses, and then revealed themselves only when they were ready to negotiate from a position of strength. They've been playing a game we didn't even know we were part of, he said quietly. A priority message arrived from Guild Administrator Thexpol. The message was marked with the highest security classification and came with an attachment that made Zexhai's blood run cold, a complete recording of the Sardinian assault on Earth 18 months earlier. The recording showed the Sardinian shock troopers landing on Earth's surface in powered armor, equipped with energy weapons and full military support. For the first hour of the operation, everything proceeded normally. The Sardinians encountered human military forces armed with primitive kinetic weapons and seemed to be winning easily. Then, something changed. The humans stopped fighting like a conventional military force and started fighting like the apex predators they had evolved to become. They used the terrain, the weather, even Earth's dangerous wildlife as weapons against the Sardinians. They coordinated attacks with a precision that suggested telepathic communication, but Dr. Nixera confirmed that humans weren't telepathic. They were just extremely good at working together under pressure. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to learn and adapt during the battle itself. Weapons that were effective against them in the first hour became useless as they developed countermeasures in real time. Tactics that worked initially were neutralized as humans adjusted their strategies to exploit Sardinian weaknesses. The recording ended with the last Sardinian transmission. They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to learn. Every casualty we inflict teaches them how to kill us better. We need immediate evacuation. No evacuation had been possible. The humans had somehow disabled the Sardinian ships in orbit, stranding the ground forces on a planet that was actively helping its native species eliminate the invaders. The final fate of the Sardinians remained unknown, but given Earth's current technological capabilities, HFY suspected they were still alive somewhere, being studied by human scientists who wanted to understand galactic military technology. Captain, Kethvar said, reviewing the combat footage, "These humans fight like us." Explain. Look at their tactics, their equipment usage, their coordination. They fight like mercenaries, professionals who have learned to overcome superior opponents through skill, preparation, and ruthless efficiency. But they have one advantage we don't, which is they're fighting for their home. The truth of that statement hit HFY like a physical blow. For all their skills and experience, he and his crew were ultimately mercenaries, professionals who fought for money. But humans had been fighting for survival since before their species achieved consciousness. Every human on Earth was a warrior trained by evolution itself, and they were defending the only world they had ever known. "Sir," Velterra interrupted, her mental voice urgent. "I'm receiving a direct communication from Earth. It's addressed specifically to you, Captain HFY of the Crimson Talon." The message appeared on his personal display, transmitted with encryption protocols that shouldn't have been available to a species that had only recently revealed their spaceflight capabilities. "Captain HFY," the message read, "we are aware that the Crimson Talon was offered the contract to invade Earth, and that you declined. We consider this a demonstration of wisdom and professionalism that we respect. We would like to offer the Crimson Talon an opportunity to discuss potential cooperative arrangements between Earth and your organization. If you are interested in learning about opportunities that do not involve attacking fortified worlds inhabited by evolved survivors, please respond to these coordinates." The message included navigation data for a location in interstellar space, halfway between the Crimson Talon's current position and Earth. It also included a promise. This meeting would be conducted under standard diplomatic protocols, with all parties free to leave at any time. We believe there may be opportunities for mutual benefit that do not require anyone to attempt invasion of a Class 12 death world. HFY looked around at his crew. For 15 years, they had built their reputation by accepting any contract and completing it successfully. Now they were being offered a chance to work with the species they had wisely chosen not to fight. "Well," he said finally, "it seems our decision not to invade Earth has opened some interesting possibilities. Opportunities to work with humans rather than against them," Dr. Nixera observed. "Given what we've learned about their capabilities, that seems considerably safer than the alternative." Gorthmag's voice carried a note of professional curiosity. "I wonder what kind of jobs humans might offer to mercenaries. Probably nothing boring." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Whatever they offer, I suspect it will be more interesting than our usual contracts. And probably more profitable, given that we'll be working with people who turn their moon into a space station without anyone noticing." Velterra's mental voice carried undertones of certainty. "Captain, I can sense the sincerity in their communication. They're offering genuine cooperation, not attempting to manipulate or deceive us. They respect our decision to avoid conflict and want to explore possibilities for mutual benefit." HFY made his decision. Send a response accepting their invitation, and begin plotting a course for the coordinates they provided. As the Crimson Talon changed course toward its meeting with representatives of Earth, Zexhai reflected on how much his understanding of the galaxy had changed in just a few weeks. He had thought he was declining a contract to attack primitives on a backwater world. Instead, he had avoided a war with a species that had spent millions of years learning how to survive against impossible odds. Now, instead of fighting the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered, he might have the chance to work alongside them. It was, he decided, a much better arrangement than the alternative. Behind them, the stars continued their eternal dance, but ahead lay a meeting that could change the fate of both the Crimson Talon and the galaxy itself. And somewhere in the darkness, Earth waited, no longer a hidden prize to be conquered, but a fortress world inhabited by 3 billion humans who had finally decided it was time to introduce themselves to their galactic neighbors. On their own terms, of course. Humans, Zexhai had learned, always did everything on their own terms.